brainstorm.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wells Fargo. Whether your needs are personal, business, commercial, or institutional, check out Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, first in banking, last in customer care. Dr. Geller.
Colonel Troyer, good evening.
To what do I owe the pleasure?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's episode 12.
Wow. Episode 12. Lots of exciting things to announce. One of which is that we were renewed for a fourth season.
Unbelievable. Against the odds, some people say, but fantastic, obviously.
And so excited to announce what that fourth season is going to be. We're going to be doing killer crime.
No way. That sounds kind of scary.
No, we're going to take turns, you and I, telling each other about a fascinating crime.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, it can be one that's been solved, one that hasn't been solved, one from a long time ago, one that's still going on. It's just the only requirement is there's got to be a crime.
Somewhere in the story, there's a crime, but no sort of guardrails in terms of the type of crime. It could be anything. So you got to tune in each week, and then it could be, anything from a bank heist to a triple murder. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, both of those sound good. I mean, as long as they don't affect me personally.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm excited about the new season. This will be season 4. I can't believe we're already at the end of season 3. That went fast. A lot of great inventions.
Yeah. Some amazing inventions spanning the different areas. We hit chemistry pretty hard.
Yes, we did.
But, we also had some classic... Latimer was a biography.
That was. I mean,
it was a nice segue.
Yeah, it was. That was a good one.
Yeah, but he was like the classic type with like the patent drawings and stuff.
Unbelievable. Meticulous drawings. A lot of people loved this forensic genealogy. Like it made me think that perhaps there's a crime in which that subject matter could reemerge, because I know it was a very popular episode for us, last week's.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can dig up either in my extended family or your extended family some horrible crime that we can then solve with our DNA online.
Well, I did have a great aunt, and I read it in the newspaper back in like the 20s. She was held up by bandits, and it literally said that. And in the reporting, it gave her home address. So different times back then in the 20s. You know what I mean?
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, but that crime was solved. But so super exciting. I'm really looking forward to the killer crimes. Any other housekeeping items or what's going on?
Yeah, speaking of crime, I wanted to give a little update on my favorite publicly traded company, the Odyssey Marine Exploration Company. They had
Are they exploring profits yet, or what are they doing?
I thought that things were really turning around this week. They won their arbitration against the country of Mexico in NAFTA court.
Okay. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's such a thing. And
is that a sponsorship or is that a real court? NAFTA court. That's not a product, right? That's not a drink, right? That's the treaty. Okay.
Mexico has to pay them $37 million.
Wow.
And I think maybe
time to sell.
Well, okay, that leads me to my next question. You're more experienced in these matters now.
Barely. Yeah.
Now, as you know, just for people who are tuning in, Odyssey Marine Exploration Company is a company that I made the dramatic mistake of investing heavily in a number of years ago. And, basically a shipwreck discovery company, and it just seemed so cool. And they were always like discovering wrecks. What I did not realize when I invested is that they inevitably get sued over those shipwrecks, by the country that originally owned the ship or whatever. So then they pivoted and they went into things like harvesting phosphate from the seafloor for fertilizer. But then Mexico sued them for that. Okay. So anyway, they win this case. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. Let me check in on the share price. This is what I want your expertise and insight on. Since the time of my acquisition of 1,267 shares of the Odyssey Marine Exploration Company, that's OMEX on the NASDAQ board, it had shed.
Oh, how ironic. It's Omex,
Yeah.
and they were sued by Mexico.
Yeah. Good
Oh,
point.
Mex. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since I had acquired the shares, they had lost 75% of their value.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem good. But I thought this week, this is great. They got some good news. I'm just going to check on the thing. It looks like this week they lost another 70% of their value. So what I bought basically at $16 per share, now they're down to $1.40 per share. So
Rounded up to $1.50. Come on.
I would like to ask you, what's going on there where they get apparently very good news and the stock price plunges?
So it could be a couple different things. And again, not licensed. So please don't anyone take this advice or knowledge as being truthful or accurate. But what I would say is maybe a few sort of entities own an outsized number of shares and they decided to dump them before other bad news comes soon. And so maybe this was just propping things up or there's some sort of insider shenanigans.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I was like, okay, somebody is making money off this good news by exiting.
Had it gone up recently in the last week or two?
I mean, tiny bit.
You know, the glass half full, though, if you think about it, losing another 70%, you know, it's 70% of a smaller number.
70%
so really
of $4. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's like, you know, the first one was the big hit.
That was the big hit. And I'm ashamed to admit that when I saw that it was $1.40, I was like, you know, I've got 1,267 shares. It wouldn't cost me that much to get up to 1,500 shares. You know?
Gosh. Yeah. Okay. I see where this is going.
You can see why I'm no longer authorized in my household to make any investment decisions.
All those passwords were changed as soon as you made that last transaction.
Wanted to put that on your radar. Odyssey Marine Company, good news, bad news. Omex down at $1.40 per share.
Floating above sea level. Come on, let's look on the bright side.
Okay, where did people listen to our podcast from last week?
Yeah, interesting places. You know, we'll start off on the East Coast with our listeners in Dowington, Pennsylvania. So that's in Pennsylvania.
I wonder which part of Pennsylvania. Dowington.
The next place I'd like to say hello to is Ponta Delgada. That's a municipality in São Miguel Island, Portugal. It's our first listener from Portugal.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
I mean, that's wild. Portugal?
That's new to the family there. Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And then lastly, hello to the friends of the pod in Houston, Texas.
Cool.
Houston. I mean, that's rock solid. That's like, you know, isn't the Kennedy Space Center there, or is it Cape? One of the space things is there.
I thought you were going to say Ken Stabler. Did Ken Stabler start out with the Oilers, or was he just a Raider the whole time?
Oh, I think he did play for the Oilers at some point, right? With the Love You Blue, like that sounds right.
Who else was it? Was Bum Phillips the coach down there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Houston. Huh?
Oh, Earl Campbell.
Earl
there was a lot going on.
He had
there.
legs the size of tree trunks.
Unbelievable.
So Houston.
Those are our towns. Yeah. Well, hello to Houston. So
fantastic.
Dowington, Pennsylvania, Ponta Delgada, Portugal, and Houston, Texas. That's a great set of towns.
And we didn't even have to lean on Canada to fill out the three picks this week.
So, Dr. Troy, are you ready to start episode 12, the final episode of the Killer Invention series on Killer Means Awesome podcast?
So excited. Let's do it.
So I'm going to tell you, it's funny that you earlier referenced the chemistry heavy nature of this season. We're going to continue with that theme. And when I was listening to our opening music, I just got all excited about the chemistry again because it feels like you're in a lab.
Yeah, a lab where something distressing has happened to a cat.
You love the fact that you found that little Easter egg, the cat. Yeah. I encourage everyone to spend time finding the cat. Every time
I try to figure out like what could have happened in that lab to that poor cat. So many things could have happened, you know.
No cats were harmed. I think it was done with a synthesizer. But let me tell you, so this last episode, we're going to feature a chemist, similar to how you started the season with a chemist. That was Albert Hoffman, I believe, was our first invention. And he had a really interesting story associated with him. And obviously his invention, everyone talks about today. We're going to end this season with another interesting chemist and her invention. So started with a male chemist, ending with the female chemist. Sounds like we bookended this season really nicely.
Perfectly. The yin and the yang. Who was the lady? Was it in Biographies? The woman who was like, one of the very first computer programmers.
That was Grace Hopper, and that was in this season because she invented computer language, basically the COBOL.
Yeah. And remember, she found the literal bug back there in the system.
And look, now we still call things bugs.
Yeah, it was like a big. It was like a big moth.
It was a huge moth. It's in the Smithsonian.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
She called it a bug. For this episode, we are going to be speaking about a woman named Stephanie Louise Kwolek.
Is she one of those Stephanies? Is it a PH or is it an F?
It's a PH.
Yeah, okay.
It is a PH.
And how do you spell Kwolek?
It's Kwolek.
Cool.
Okay. She was born in 1923 to Polish immigrants in the suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a town called New Kensington. Growing up in this small town, very bright, went to a school in which the classrooms shared grades, which they said really worked to her advantage because she could sort of reach up and essentially, skip a grade by just staying in the same classroom.
Yeah.
And she excelled in particular in science. She basically just outpaced everybody in both classes. They attribute her interest and love in science to her father, John. He was what's known as a naturalist. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this some kind of nudist colony?
Naked all through Pittsburgh.
I know.
Pittsburgh is not where I would choose to start a nudist colony.
Outside Pittsburgh?
Yeah. It's just,
there's a lot of good woods in Pennsylvania. You get natural there.
It gets pretty cold there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of beer drinking around there. There's a lot of bodies that you might not want to see. Okay, but he's a different kind of naturalist.
He is indeed. He's a botanist. He's very interested in nature. Spends hours with Stephanie collecting plants, observing animals that they would give their own names to, and they kept scrapbooks. So she was really into it.
Cool.
Unfortunately, her dad passed away when she was 10, but still attributed her interest in science to him. Her mother, Nellie, worked as a seamstress. So anyways, growing up, she focused on science, really thought she could be a doctor. By 1946, she had graduated from Carnegie Mellon University. Back then, it was called Margaret Morrison Carnegie College of Carnegie Mellon University, now just known as Carnegie Mellon. And she majored in chemistry and got her degree. 1946, not a lot of women studying chemistry at Carnegie Mellon. She really stood out.
Great school. And it's right there in Pittsburgh, right?
It is, right in her backyard, literally. She had planned to become a doctor, but had no money. And so when she graduated with her degree in chemistry, she thought she should leverage that degree to get a job, which would be also a good foundation for going to med school. So she goes out on the job market with a degree in chemistry.
From a good school.
From a very good school.
Yeah, but as a woman in the 40s. Well, let's see, the 46. So there were a lot of women in the workforce during World War II. So maybe people are kind of habituated to the idea like, hey, women make great employees.
Well, and not only that, there were still a lot of vacancies in companies in which a lot of the guys went to fight in the war. So this is right after the war, and they haven't necessarily gone right back to work. So, sort of a good time to be looking in that sense. Anyway, so she ends up interviewing at the chemical company DuPont, where she meets her future mentor, a gentleman named Dr. William Hale Charch. Maybe I'm not pronouncing that right. And that was at their Buffalo, New York facility. DuPont at the time had introduced nylon just before the war. And so their business really took off.
Boom.
And they were really doing well in textiles, textile applications. So she interviews with Dr. Charch, and he, at the end of the interview, says, okay, well, the company will reach out to you in a couple of weeks and we'll let you know, if there's an offer. She said, oh, is there any way you could let me know sooner? Because I actually have another offer that I'm considering.
Whoa.
Which was the truth. She had another offer.
Oh, yes. I thought it was just a little play.
No, she was not negotiating. She actually had another offer and was concerned about the timing. Huh. So when she mentioned that to him, he apparently called in his receptionist and dictated her offer letter in front of her and handed her the offer.
Cool. Seems like a scene in a movie.
It seems like a scene in the movie, but I actually verified it in 2 sources. So it really did happen. Like she got the...
Track down some relatives, do some interviews.
I used that forensic genealogy you spoke about in the last episode. Mm-hmm. I had to get the right pizza crust because when that one woman discarded it, turns out it was her friend, was not her sister.
Well, then the fallback is always the dental floss. That's how Kirk Kerkorian proved that Lisa Bonder, the tennis player, that her child was actually Steve Bing's. It wasn't Kirk Kerkorian.
What?
Yeah. Had his private investigator go through the trash and get the DNA. Think it was going through Steve Bing's trash, getting his dental floss. Bing later committed suicide, by the way. Getting his dental floss, and it proved that the child was Mr. Bing's, not Mr. Krikorian's. Now, Krikorian was like in his freaking 70s or 80s. So I'm sure he was like, yeah, I don't think I'm still having kids, but maybe. I don't know. Let's check it out. Okay. But a little bit of a tangent.
So Stephanie gets the job at DuPont, and she said she really wanted the job at DuPont for two reasons. One, she found the work that they were proposing very interesting, so she thought it'd be a great job. And then two, DuPont was one of the few companies at the time that paid the same salary to men and women.
Great.
There was no discount because you were a woman.
Fantastic.
So it was kind of a forward-looking company, and she really liked the work. So, of course, she still only thought she'd be there temporarily. She was going to save money.
She's going to be a doctor. She's going to go back to med school.
But you know what happens?
She's so good at this job that her whole life takes a different turn.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So she falls in love, as a lot of us do, with researching polymers. I mean, who wouldn't?
I thought you were going to. Yeah, I thought you were going to say with Charch. Fell in love with Charch, like the rest of us always do. So she was a bit of an aficionado of polymers, huh?
Found it super challenging and interesting. Loved the sort of pressure to discover new things and things like that.
Yeah.
So as you referenced, she decided, I'm just going to pour all of my energy into this job, and I'm not going to go to medical school. And I want to make my career as a chemist. So that was her big decision after working at DuPont for a while.
She bet on herself.
She really did.
She said, I'm not going to go just do the standard route. I'm going to follow my passion for polymers.
That's exactly what she did. And she also alluded to the fact that it seemed to combine her love of fabrics and science, because creating these polymers essentially were creating new fibers to make fabrics.
Cool.
Which she actually ended up being involved in, which we'll get to. So, generally speaking, a polymer is this substance of very large molecules. I'm getting this from science sources.
And I'm already lost, by the way, but go ahead. Go through whatever you got.
Picture like a chain of molecules all strung together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an unbreakable bond, basically, that these molecules are making.
And do they give us cancer?
They probably do in their synthetic form. They do exist in the real world as well, but they're primarily used in things like plastics.
Yeah.
But they're also found in DNA and proteins. So this is polymers exist in, as I mentioned, the natural world. You can also make synthetic polymers.
Okay, so I shouldn't just be down on polymers.
I could tell you were really quick to judge polymers. And
Yeah.
I felt like, I don't know where that's coming from, because there is such thing as good polymers.
There's so many stereotypes about polymers. I hate to trade in stereotypes, so let's just stick to the facts.
So Stephanie Kwolek, she's focused more on the man-made polymers.
Right.
So that's what she's working with.
Plastics, Benjamin, plastics.
Pretty much. But she's also tasked with different fabrics, like finding fabrics. It's not all about the plastics.
Okay.
And so she's creating these synthetic fibers that have to withstand a lot of pressure. Like they have to be strong. So like nylon, it's unrippable or whatever. Like it always has to be better than an alternative.
Right.
The natural fibers, the cotton that rips.
Was military stuff driving this, or was this just regular industrial use?
It was both. I mean, so military had their own objectives for them helping to create fibers that would protect soldiers in war. So there was definitely influence on that side, but then also commercially, they were trying to create stuff that people would buy. Yeah. And so, creating a cheaper version of stuff was definitely the big focus.
Cool. All
right. Like they ended up, I think it was polyester, like that kind of thing. Like
so she's well on her way.
Jump ahead to 1950. Her research group moves to Wilmington, Delaware.
That's probably where DuPont is headquartered, maybe. Delaware.
I think you're right. So, she described her work as being somewhat similar to what spiders do when they build webs.
Incredible, by the way. I encourage all listeners who ever have a minute, sit there and watch a spider spin a web. It's insane. It's the greatest magic trick you've ever seen, and it happens all day long right in your backyard. Okay, sorry.
It's unbelievable. No, I totally agree. You've captured it well in photos. Yeah, so she's working on these fibers, and again, the the spiders spin these very, what's known as high tensile fibers to make their webs. So it can withstand a lot of stress. You know, like when you see it blowing in the wind and stuff.
Well, yeah. And not only that, it supports the weight of the spider. So it's at the beginning of its web, but it's only got a few strands, and the strands go from one place to some faraway shrub with wind and stuff. How does the thing support the weight of the spider?
What I'm telling you, it's because they're high tensile. So they can withstand a high degree of stress before they break or rip.
Cool. I wonder what they're made out of.
Well, again, they're like a natural forming polymer. Yeah.
And I know the things that the spiders spit it out with is the spinnerets.
Oh, well, guess what they use at DuPont to spin their fibers?
Spinnerets?
They do.
No way.
Yeah, they use spinnerets.
All right. This is a great episode.
Well, it's funny because I started out thinking I was going to do something on biomimicry, like inventions that were inspired by things in nature, because there's like 3 or 4 that are just incredible stories. They're great stories. But this sort of has some of that. You know, the way in which they made the synthetic fibers was inspired by what spiders are doing.
Yeah, you know, it's like the remember they had the UFO video a few years back from like the fighter pilots down in San Diego, and they're like,
that was cool.
We know of no human technology that can move in this way or whatever. And I was like, okay, maybe not but like literally hummingbirds do that exact thing.
Unbelievable.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know, there's things in nature that are just stunning all by themselves. Okay.
Well, yeah, but, you know, the bullet train in Japan was inspired by the kingfisher because the way in which they enter the water apparently is optimized to not cause any splash at all. So when they go through tunnels, it like completely changed how they designed the bullet train. And it was entirely modeled on the mapping and study of the kingfisher.
That's a beautiful bird, by the way. That's the blue one, right?
Yeah, it's really colorful.
Yeah,
cool.
And I always thought kingfisher, it sounds like a big bird, but no, it's a normal-sized bird.
Yeah, no, they're little.
Cool. Bullet train. And you gave me a term I didn't even know about, biomimicry.
The best one is Velcro, so maybe we'll leave that for another. But it happened to do with a guy who had a dog with burrs, and he studied it under a microscope and developed Velcro.
How did we not do Velcro this season? Okay.
No, I almost did. I have it outlined.
Future, Jesus.
I did this one instead. Because you know what? It's not that interesting outside of him figuring out how the hook system works to create Velcro.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, he didn't really do much else, and that's it.
Did he make crazy money off it?
He did. He got really rich. All right. So now in 1959, right? So she's been at DuPont now, 13 years or whatever.
And she's been in Delaware for 9 years.
She's been in Delaware. She wins an award from the American Chemical Society for a paper that she published called The Nylon Rope Trick. And in this nylon rope trick, she demonstrates a way of producing an actual nylon fiber in a beaker at room temperature. Typically, it had to be, extreme temperatures. And so she's able to actually demonstrate this experiment in a classroom. So you can go online and watch a video of the nylon rope trick. It's amazing. It's cool.
But describe it. What is the trick?
Essentially, she uses a solution in a beaker, so it's liquid, right? And then she's able to start spinning it around and then slowly pulls out like a thread, like a thick thread.
Whoa.
Where she's starting to create fibers that you can use to make clothing.
Cool.
Out of the solution. It looks like water.
Is it at wacky temperatures or not?
That's really what I'm saying. So she figured out a way to demonstrate this with the polymers at room temperature.
At room temperature.
It's incredible.
So is the solution like super glue or something? Like some crazy solution?
No, I mean, I can give you the polymer name. I think it was polyphenylene terephthalamide. So it's that stuff that, you can't buy at the store, but she's combining she's a chemist. Right? I mentioned that. She's not putting super glue in the water. You know what I mean? It's not a fake thing.
Yeah.
This isn't like a little soap detergent and then I make big bubbles and I'm a scientist. No. This is like she's a chemist.
You know the nylon rope trick. And she won an award for that paper?
Won a big award.
From who was it from? American Chemical what?
The ACS, the American Chemical Society.
Yeah. I still have never medaled there. I've never won anything there.
If you applied. You don't win if you don't apply.
Oh, I mean, I'm in the running every year.
When have you published, I guess. They base it off of publications.
Those were the old days, man. You name a paper, a scientific paper, the nylon rope trick.
It's really cool. You should see it. Like the drawings are great and the video's insane, like when she does it. Anyways, so she obviously is very well regarded at DuPont and now she's been fully embraced. The photo of her with like her colleagues in this one department, like it's like the super nerd chemists polymer people is hysterical. It's like Margaret Rudkin when she's on the board at Campbell's,
Yeah.
where it's like a ton of really old white guys and her.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
It's like the scientist, but there's only like 4 other people on her team, and they all look like, stereotypical old
Nerd.
white scientists. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's tiny. She's comically small. She's kind of like Grace Hopper. She's really small.
Let's tread carefully here. We got in some trouble with the Grace Hopper
Hey, but the
thing,
season's
dude.
over. You know what I'm saying?
But when you were referring to her costume as opposed to her service uniform.
Okay, so let's skip ahead to 1964. So again, she's just adding the years of research and doing amazing things at DuPont. So around 1964, there's an anticipation of a gasoline shortage that the country's dealing with, that everyone knows it's about to happen.
Interesting. I thought that I always associate that with the 70s. Okay, but people
It
are
happens
worried
like
about
every
it.
cycle. Like there's always a gasoline shortage.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of made that up, but it sounds right. Like it sounds like that this wasn't the only time there's a gasoline shortage in the 70s. That's like the one we remember.
Right. Just edit out the made that up because it sounded very authoritative. I immediately believed it.
Yeah, shoot. Okay. Luckily I control the editing. So DuPont had tasked Kwolek and her group with searching for a lightweight, strong fiber that they could use to replace steel in tires. And this was an anticipation of this gasoline shortage, because if you have lighter tires, you'll use less gas and everything's going to be more economical. So they need a cheaper way and a stronger way to put these fibers in tires.
So before that, steel was an important part of the tire?
Yeah, like whatever the tires were back in the 50s and 60s, they were steel radius tires or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like when we were kids, you would still see that, like a torn up tire, like you'd see the metal,
right,
like lattice work, torn where it had split open.
Exactly, and it's very heavy. So like you're powering these steel, tires. Steel is not user friendly from a weight perspective.
Okay. So what is Stephanie
so she's working on the polymers to try to get, these steel like fibers with her famous, polymer. So anyways, she's playing around with these liquid crystals in a solution. She had to what's called melt spun at over 200 degrees Celsius, which is about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So that she couldn't do her beaker trick. This was more hardcore polymers.
What was that term that you skipped right on past? Melt spun?
Yeah, melt spun is when it goes in the spinneret. And so it has to be melt spun, almost like when those cotton candy machines.
Best.
It's sort of like that.
My dad was obsessed with those. We'd go to hockey games. It took me a long time to get to ice hockey, but I finally got there. Yeah, we'd go to those games and he would just inhale that cotton candy. And I was, even for me, even for a sweet tooth kid, I was like, that's too much. Like it's just straight sugar. Like, well, I don't know. You're just biting down on it and it's just sugar. But he would inhale those. But the fun part was watching the person make.
Yeah. So with that cone.
Yeah.
Doctor, so the polymers she's playing around with, as mentioned, they have to be melt spun. It's an onerous process given the heat. And she's experimenting with a lower melt condensation polymerization process.
Yeah.
That's a lot to say.
That's melt the obvious. I was going to say though, I mean, that's the path I would have taken.
That's my second path. First was just like maybe a nap and then I'll figure it out later. Or I'll do that melt condensation polymerization process.
Nice use of the word onerous, by the way. You don't hear that word used as much nowadays. That's a good one.
Yeah. So she's doing this new process. So in doing this, that spinneret, now it's being reduced to temperatures between 0 and 40 degrees Celsius, 32 to 104 Fahrenheit. So a more reasonable temperature.
Good.
Okay. So
fewer employees going to the burn unit.
Exactly. So definitely not the spinneret guy, because believe it or not, there was a spinneret guy. Like that'd be an interesting title.
Yeah.
All right. Now hang with me while I lay down a little bit of science.
Okay.
Because she is working with a poly-P benzamide and poly-P phenylene terephthalamide. Now, she puts both of those, what are known as liquid crystal polymers, which, by the way, are the first ever prepared that she created these liquid crystal polymers. She puts them into a solution, okay? Just like she normally does to try to find this replacement for steel. So conventional polymer solutions are usually very clear and translucent, sort of like that rope trick. It looks like water.
Right.
And it has a very thick viscosity. So it actually is more like a molasses, okay? Then you start spinning. Her polymer solution solution looked more cloudy. So it looked more like buttermilk. So she was looking at it. She's like, that's interesting. And then she noticed, and I'm going to read a quote from her. She says, the solution that I prepared looked like a dispersion, but was totally filterable through a fine pore filter. This was a liquid crystalline solution, but I did not know it at the time. So basically, in what I will say layman's terms, and hopefully I'm not offending anyone, it means that it looked like something that you could filter and get to a clearer version, yet it went right through the finest filters and remained that weird buttery look.
Weird.
So when they achieve this type of cloudy solution,
there's a word for that. There's like mayonnaise is an example
turbid or
of that.
not opaque. Like, I don't know.
No, there's some specific. It'll come to me. Okay, keep going.
So she, has this solution. It's cloudy, which typically means they throw it away. That's what you do. You don't waste the spinneret time on a cloudy solution. It's not going to work.
Right. But see, I love it. This is where the genius comes in, where everybody else is like, oh, we throw it out. It's not clear. And she's like, hold on.
Yeah, perfect distillation of what we're getting to, because that's exactly right. She had this instinct that she wanted to spin this cloudy solution. Now, again, typically they throw them out. That was the norm. Okay. So she brings her solution to guess who?
Charge.
The spinneret.
Oh, the spinneret guy. Yeah.
The spinneret technician.
Yeah.
And so what do you think his response was?
He's like, well, that's cloudy. I've never worked with that. Let me see what I can do.
And I'm not sure if that's what he said verbatim, but what he did intimate is that he felt that her solution would clog the machine.
Oh. Yeah.
So he said, no, I'm not spinning this cloudy buttermilk. Like, you're going to ruin the equipment.
Incidentally, do you think there was did she ever have trouble with employees? Like, were any of her employees like huffing the materials? This sounds like the kind of stuff that people would try to get high off of the fumes from these things.
Not at all. Like, you never read about any sort of untoward activity in this heavy research department.
Did she instantly and summarily fire the spinneret guy?
No. So what she did instead?
Wait till he went home and then used his machine?
The spinneret?
Yeah.
No one knows how to use the spinneret but Charles. By the way, his name is Charles Smullen. Doesn't that sound like a Simpsons character?
It's
Who's the spinneret guy? Oh, it's Charles Smullen. Oh, Smullen? We got Smullen?
Smullen. And Smullen with a name like that, and he's turning up his nose at a cloudy solution. It's like, your last name is Smullen. Like, you should trade in cloudy solutions.
I'm a decorated chemist and you're the spinneret technician? I'm going to pull rank here. Like this, we're going to spin this buttermilk baby. Let's get going. Okay. Now, before I continue with the reveal, I'm telling you, this is how we pay the bill. This is a cliffhanger. This is what is known as a cliffhanger. Let's hear from our sponsor, and then I'm going to lay down a little more science and, more importantly, reveal the big invention.
Oh, okay.
Just hold on.
If we must. With the troubling rise in identity theft, cyber attacks, and fraud, now more than ever, you need a bank which has your back. And then there's Wells Fargo. At Wells Fargo, we understand that banking is more than just dollars and cents. It's relationships, time with family, and creating memories, like the 6.5 hours you spent on hold waiting to talk to the Wells Fargo fraud investigator. Wells Fargo, where $20,000 of your money can vanish overnight. And fraud protection is an afterthought.
All right, Dr. Where we left off, we had this cloudy solution. We had Charles Smullen standing in the way of this solution being spun in the spinneret.
Wow, that was like some kind of a tongue twister, but go ahead.
I know. She convinced him to spin. So he said, fine, we're going to spin. Surprisingly, the fibers that started to be spun had unprecedented stiffness and tensile strength. It was supposedly an amazing new fiber in that it was not breaking where nylon typically broke. That chain, that polymer chain, could not be broken.
I wonder what it looked like. You know what I mean? Like, was it plastic, or did it look like metal, or did it look like?
It looks like when if you stretch silly putty really long, like it, it's like that kind of vibe.
But super strong, hard to break. And here he was saying, "You're going to break my machine." Not only does it not break the machine, it's the best thing they've ever spun out of the machine.
That's exactly right. And she quickly learned that if you heat treat them, you can make them even stronger.
man.
Yeah. So these polymer molecules, she said, were shaped like rods, and they were what's known as highly oriented. So very well aligned next to each other. Picture them like all packed in, such that it gave the fiber extraordinary strength.
Man, it's almost like it was something that was meant to be. It was just waiting to be discovered. Like if you just get the solution just right, or you get the temperature or whatever, like these things will all they'll all lock into place, like pack in next to each other, super strong. Like,
but you could also see someone just like tossing it out in the sink. It's like, oh, there goes that fiber that would have changed everything. Because it was cloudy.
If you left Smullen in charge, that's where we'd be. But fortunately, Stephanie was on the job.
Yeah.
Does she immediately say like, this is insane?
Immediately. And she then realizes she could make it even stronger with heat. So the innovative polymer that she invented was called polyp-phenylene terephthalamide.
I have always wondered who invented that. Now we know.
We also know that it was released commercially under the name Kevlar.
Oh, I was thinking about Kevlar with the with the military
She invented
Kevlar.
She is the inventor of Kevlar.
Do you think it's Kevlar? You know how some hockey players, around the neck, some players will wear the guard to keep the skate blade from slicing open the neck.
Yes.
Do you think Kevlar's in there? Gotta be, right?
She quickly learned that not only was it stronger than nylon, it was 5 times stronger than steel, yet it was 5 times lighter. So this quickly changed what's known as polymer chemistry. It became a new field. That was in that period in the late 60s.
Do bulletproof vests use Kevlar?
Yeah, everything. So we're going to get to the applications. Right. The strength of this fabric was like nothing anyone had ever seen, or of the fibers.
Wow.
So he's working in the lab, and soon after her discovery started to make its way around DuPont, one of the people who was working on the bulletproof vest asked if she could spare a tiny bit of fiber. So she gave him sheets of fiber. And they have this on film. It's incredible. And he shot a bullet through it. And like it only needed a certain number of sheets, these wafer thin sheets of Kevlar to actually block a bullet. So it was a game changer because you could not outfit soldiers with that level of protection in steel because they'd be like carrying a tank on their head. Like it is too heavy.
Yeah. Does she become like a senior vice president overnight at DuPont?
I don't know. She really did stay in the chemistry department there. It wasn't so much title driven.
And I wonder if 69, so America is fully involved in Vietnam at that point. Does Kevlar ever make its way to Vietnam or not?
It sure does. They did introduce it to the market in 1971. So for the last few years of the war. So the application within that first experiment in the bulletproof vest were astounding. Like people could not believe it because it really was so lightweight.
Also, police officers can use it.
Everything, personal armor generally, all of a sudden overnight had to have Kevlar.
That's awesome. And it's just crazy that it stemmed from fears about the gasoline shortage and wanting to make cars lighter and tires lighter.
Which they did. Like this ended up being useful in that respect as well. They discovered a lot of things.
So do they put Kevlar in tires?
Not a ton, but they do in bike tires, like in smaller applications. It's pretty expensive, and there is a little bit of a kryptonite to Kevlar, which I'll get to. But anyway, so Kevlar became obviously incredibly popular for armor because of its effectiveness, stopping bullets, and also being lightweight.
Also, just a good name. I mean, that other thing was super bulky. That long thing you had.
I put on a t-shirt.
Yeah, but Kevlar, I don't know how they came up with that, but that
sounds like your high school buddy. Hey, Kevlar, what you up to this weekend?
And it's just like instantly iconic. It's like Kleenex. It's like Kevlar. It's like super strong.
I'll read off some of the applications of Kevlar today. Obviously, we talked about all the body armor, which is vitally important. All the troops have it. It's also used in bike tires, tennis rackets, bowstrings, musical instruments.
Whoa. Back up. Hold on. Musical instruments. What musical instruments are using Kevlar?
Drumheads. Kevlar in drumheads.
Drumheads. Okay.
And it's also in the fuselage of airplanes. I mean, it's everywhere. Wind turbines, kayaks and canoes, mooring lines, grill cleaners, and also like bridge cables.
Wait. Grill cleaners. You mean like the brush that you brush off your grill?
I really debated whether I was going to include that one because it definitely doesn't rise to the level of bridge cables. but it was foundational to the Q Swiper XL Steam Clean Grill Cleaner.
Yeah.
So it was a cleaning cloth. Okay. It's like, imagine SOS, but on steroids. Now you're talking about a Kevlar cleaning. I understand what you're saying.
Bridge cables. Now that sounds important.
So that's phenomenal because steel, again, very heavy. So it requires, different types of pulleys and blah, blah,
It's
blah.
also ironic, I think of Pittsburgh as the steel city, and it's ironic that a girl from Pittsburgh helps replace it.
That's incredible. I did not even consider that.
That's why it takes two of us, so just you think like, what, this would be so much easier. It's just Dr. Geller and it's a one-man show, but once in a while it helps to have two brains going at this.
I didn't need to be called out on the Q Swiper XL Steam Clean Grill Cleaner, but yes, totally get it. So now, Dr. Hart, let me tell you that as brilliant of an invention that Kevlar is, and again, look at how many lives saved, Kevlar's strength can be decreased over time due to exposure to sunlight.
Really?
And any UV radiation.
Interesting.
Yeah, UV radiation. That's a Achilles heel. Like, you got to wear your sunscreen.
Well, so do they encase it in stuff that keeps the UV away?
They try to minimize the exposure, and so, yes, they tried those types of things, but it is problematic. Like, it does not withstand sunlight very well. So in terms of,
how big a deterioration are we talking?
Pretty bad and pretty expensive.
Whoa. What did they come up with sort of next generation products that are sort of
Constantly.
Kevlar 2.0 or 3.0?
Yes. In fact, there's now several different Kevlar strains for certain applications. So yeah, there's all different types of Kevlar behind
And do
the
all
scenes.
different companies make it now, or is it still a DuPont show?
It's all licensed, so it's patented by DuPont. So other companies make it, but yeah, it's all based on the DuPont
Hold
license.
on. She was born in 1923 and then had the crazy discovery in 69, invention in 69. So she was 46.
But, not great for advertising if it's not good in the sun, because it's like, dude, this is going to stop any bullet unless it's sunny out.
Well, no, I don't get that sense. I don't think it's instantly rendered unusable, is it?
I think it's pretty bad.
Really?
I think, cops in LA are like, dude, nice bulletproof vest. This isn't Seattle. But this is not going to help you.
You mean like one sunny day? I thought over years of UV exposure.
I'm kidding. Yeah, it does. It's a slow burn. But again, known as a problem in terms of its durability over time. So yeah, it's not overnight. I was joking. But definitely a concern if you have to continuously purchase, equipment for the military if it's going to be exposed in those types of weather.
Stupid question. UV light, is that only like sunlight? Like, so for instance, at the ice rink, that's not a problem. You can have your Kevlar socks.
I don't know.
Okay. Can you get back to me on that? I'd like to know on the hockey front whether Kevlar is still useful.
You're going to have to stay tuned for season 5 when we come back to chemistry only. So, she spent 40 years at DuPont. And so in addition to Kevlar, which again, you'd think, done, like I did Kevlar. You want me to come back to work tomorrow? Jeez.
That's where I would, buy an island in Hawaii and then just sayonara.
She's incredible. And so she ended up on 28 patents at DuPont and helped produce spandex. She created Lycra, like that fabric. Nomex, which is like a sunscreen type of fabric, I think. And so, was involved in a lot of incredibly important discoveries in chemistry at DuPont.
Whatever became of Smullen?
I didn't have time to research him, but let's just say he's not a
the
hero
dustbin
in this story
of history.
Well, he's like, if he could argue if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have Kevlar, because ultimately he could have just said no.
Yeah, he could have locked up his machine for the night and said nope.
And he probably thought about it. But anyways, in 1986, she retired.
86? Wow.
Yes,
she kept
she worked there until 1986.
Holy cow.
And she was the first woman in DuPont's history to earn the company's Lavoisier, forgive me to our French professor friend, medal for outstanding technical achievement in research. And she's still the only woman in DuPont history to win the award.
Now that seems like more of an indictment of DuPont than just a mark in her favor. She's the only.
I noticed they didn't jump to sponsor this episode.
She's the only woman that's ever won that thing.
Only woman at the company to win.
And it's read it again. What is it? Not the French name, but what's it for? Outstanding.
Why don't you want me to say the French name again? Is that offensive to you as a Frenchman?
No, but It just seemed like a fairly straightforward thing they were praising. It was like outstanding achievement.
It's called the Lavoisier Medal, and it's for outstanding technical achievement in research.
Like, see, that seems like there must have been some other women at DuPont who did some outstanding work.
How do you know? Maybe there weren't that many great chemists, you know. I don't know. When she won the award, it said she was, quote, a persistent experimentalist and role model whose discovery of liquid crystalline polyamide led to Kevlar aramid fibers, which was the technical invention.
Unbelievable.
I mean, really cool. And so, you know, her specific discovery at DuPont generated several $1 billion in revenue for DuPont, but she never benefited Free Chemicals. Like, hey, you know what? Go ahead and take that rope trick home with you tonight. You don't have to pay
You know
for
what?
it.
We're getting a new spinneret, and it's just we're gonna throw the old one out. Like, just take the old one home. Nobody's looking. You came up with Kevlar. Treat yourself, okay? Better to ask for forgiveness, you know? So she's just on a regular salary all those years?
She is.
Huh.
But she was also very well known in the chemistry
Yeah.
field and served as a
Came up with
mentor to a
Kevlar.
lot of women.
Yeah.
Yes. And she was very interested in helping get youth interested in science. So there's a lot of videos of her doing her rope trick, you know, nylon rope trick in front of small kids and things like that.
Know anything about her personal life? Did you wind up, you know, having a family or, you know?
She didn't. You know, she ended up single and she
Married to her work.
was just dedicated, very much so. In fact, in 1996, she was awarded the National Medal of Technology by President Clinton. And if you remember me referencing her height, it's somewhat comical in that seriously she barely comes up to his waist. Like she's very short.
Plus she's quite old by then, so she may be a little
very
bit
old.
kind of shrunken and not as
Yes.
tall as she once was.
But how cool. She wins a National Medal of Technology
Now,
from
where
the
does that
president.
rank? I remember Trump said that the presidential thing he thinks is even better than the
Number one.
Yeah. She got the Medal of Technology. The Presidential Medal of Technology?
I think it's just called the National Medal of Technology, but the president, Clinton, you know, presented it to her. It was a big
Cool.
ceremony. Yeah, which is pretty cool.
And that was 96, so that's 10 years after she retired.
Yes. And she was one of only 4 women to be inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. That's a pretty cool
That's
thing.
very cool. Did any of our other people from earlier this year, any of those women on there?
Yes, I believe so, actually. But don't have the time to reference them. But what I will say is
Maybe Grace Hopper? I don't know.
she may have. I think she did actually make the hall. So yes, you're right. Stephanie also earned, in terms of medal ranking, I don't know where this is, she received the Perkin Medal.
Oh, no way! The guy who came up with the synthetic dye?
Yes, it
Was
must
that
be.
his name? There's something about the Perkin. Somebody we've talked about the Perkin medal before.
All right, well, maybe you could look that up while I wrap this up, because that would be an insane tie-in that I did not even notice.
Huh.
Perkin Medal in American Chemical Society. So that was a huge deal. And then in 2003, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. So she's really getting a lot of awards.
Wait, 2003. When did she die?
Well, hold on. I'm not jumping ahead to her death yet. The Royal Society of Chemistry grants a biennial Stephanie L. Kwolek Award, quote, to recognize exceptional contributors to the area of materials chemistry from a scientist working outside the UK. So interesting to have an award, but have, you know, sort of geographical terms associated with it.
Wait.
But nonetheless, the Royal Society of Chemistry.
But it's for people who are working on it outside of the UK?
Yeah, for like people who make exceptional contributions to materials chemistry, but are not British, are not working in the UK. So I guess they kind of have it like they sort of like have the in-house and out-of-house awards. So she lived a really great life. She died at the age of 90 in 2014.
2014 in 90.
Yeah, at
What
90.
a life.
Yeah, well, she said towards the end of her life, she said, quote, I was fortunate enough to do something that would be a benefit to mankind. It's been an extremely satisfying discovery. I don't think there's anything like saving someone's life to bring you satisfaction and happiness.
Think of all the people whose lives were saved, you know, thanks
Unbelievable.
to this tiny little woman from Pittsburgh.
Obviously, she's revered for enabling so many people to live, you know, like directly from her invention.
Yeah, this is the Perkin is that guy that you already did, William Henry Perkin, who invented the synthetic dye.
I can't believe it. What a wonderful tie-in, right?
Yeah.
Like that she won the Perkin Medal and we featured him. Oh, that's fantastic.
We learned a lot about chemistry this season, I have
A lot
to
of good
say.
stuff. Well, I felt like ending on a positive, right? Like this is a discovery that really benefited
But
society.
also, it's nice that we got to polymers. That just feels like a classic
Yeah.
chemistry
Pretty
thing.
cool.
Like,
Yeah, encourage you to check out the video for the nylon rope trick because it really is like
do you
crazy
think you can
science. Like it's
buy
pretty cool.
polymer solutions like on Amazon and do some fun at home with some liquid
I think you
polymers? I bet you
can.
can.
Yeah, I think she designed it so that you could. I think like invent your own polymers and things like that. But it
Nice.
really became a new, part of science.
I bet there's some amazing like slow-mo microscopic photography of the things forming.
Yeah, I mean, how interesting to be able to look at something like that and instantly know that it's going to be a game changer in terms of its molecular strength. Like just knowing that
I
before
wonder,
anybody
I'd
else.
like to know how long it took them to figure out, uh-oh, sunlight's an issue here.
Right, that's the funny thing of just like, oh, darn it. It doesn't work well when it's sunny
Yeah.
out. But it's not, as we mentioned, it's not that extreme.
Yeah, but I mean, you do imagine that there was a certain point at which, like, all the first generation of Kevlar products at police departments and military or whatever, they started realizing, like, hey, these aren't working the way they used to.
Right.
Like, that guy just keeled over. That was a BB gun, and he fell down.
Right. That's a water pistol. I don't understand. I got a sunburn. Like, what is going on with this Kevlar? I'm getting a sunburn. Like, how's it going to stop a bullet if I'm getting a sunburn? But yeah, so pretty incredible. Again, in terms of the practical applications, like, who would have thought bridge cables?
Well, and grill cleaners. I mean,
This is going to be the bane of my existence all next season.
I just think of like the brush that you use to clean
Called
up.
over research.
Kevlar. Stephanie Kwolek.
Super cool, like just a really fascinating woman who just knew early on that she had a passion for chemistry. But she was a true pioneer. Like she was a part of a lot of great discoveries in chemistry.
Yeah. And it sucks that her dad died when she was only 10.
Such a bummer. They were really close and he seemed like a really cool guy.
Yeah, he must have been proud of her on the other side. It's additionally impressive if you think of the fact that, she's a woman. She's Polish. There's a lot of stereotypes
Yep.
about Polish people and sort of like discrimination against Polish people.
100%.
And, the parents are recent immigrants. One of them died. Like, she came from a background that you wouldn't necessarily predict. This person is going to be wildly successful in this male-dominated, realm. But
yeah, it's in a very specific area of science. So it's like she found the perfect part of science that, as she mentioned, like it included all of her interests because it did include fibers and the tensile strength, and she was used to that from her mother's work.
And you used a phrase, materials chemistry. I had never heard that, but
yes,
that's cool.
Yeah, I have to say, big picture is, yes, she faced a lot of adversity. She went to an amazing school and obviously excelled at a super high level, but also really cool when someone finds their calling early, has an opportunity to pursue it, actually pursues that interest and becomes wildly successful and groundbreaking. Like that's pretty rare, like big picture.
Also, it shows that it pays not to be too locked into like, I'm going to follow this path. Like I'm going to, because her plan was I'll work
Med
for a few
school.
years,
Yep.
then I'll go to med school, then I'll be a doctor.
Absolutely.
But, she was open to like, okay, what does life put in front of me? I'm actually quite interested in that.
Yeah. But interesting that we started the season with the discovery of LSD, which is having a lot of positive effects in various trials and so on and so forth, and ending the season with Kevlar and chemistry invention that also had a lot of benefits in, as we've discussed, so many different ways.
And we also had the guy Perkin himself who invented the synthetic dye.
All came together.
It's
inadvertently, which is the best
I didn't realize that we would hit chemistry so hard. I think of inventions as like tinkerers, but not always like the lab coats and stuff.
All right, so next season, Dr. It's killer crime. However, the good news is that we're not changing the podcast. It's staying as KMA Podcast. So if you follow the show, you will automatically get the next season delivered to you.
Yeah, you got to follow. Killer means awesome. You follow the show, and then you'll see all the seasons. You'll see 1, 2, 3.
It's all there.
And then soon, we'll be starting out season 4. I will handle the
Killer
first episode.
crime.
Each episode will involve a crime.
Yes.
And one that's at least interesting, but hopefully fascinating. And
I'm
We'll take
excited.
turns telling each other the tale.
It'll be our own spin on killer crime.
You know, maybe we'll solve a crime.
On that note, let's wrap season 3, Killer Inventions. Dr. Harder, thank you for all the phenomenal invention stories.
Right back at you, and you finished up so strong. Stephanie Kwolek, big fan.
Fantastic. We will play our outro music for the last time on Killer Inventions, but we'll see everybody soon in the first episode of Killer Crime.
Can't wait.